Have you ever noticed how the people we're most drawn to aren't the ones who seem perfect? Today, we're going to explore something that might completely change how you think about strength and weakness. It's a paradox that once you understand it, will transform every relationship in your life. The surprising truth is, the very things we're afraid to show about ourselves are often the things that make us most relatable and attractive to others. Let's talk about something we all do, even though we might not realize it. Think about the last time you were in a meeting or at a social gathering. Chances are you were carefully managing how others saw you. We all do this. We present our highlight reel while keeping our blooper reel safely hidden away. It's like we're constantly walking on eggshells, terrified that if people see our real struggles, our doubts, or our fears, they'll reject us. This fear creates an invisible barrier between us and genuine connection. But here's the thing, maintaining this perfect image is like trying to hold your breath underwater. Eventually, you have to come up for air. The energy it takes to keep up appearances is draining us, and ironically, keeping us from the very connections we crave. Let's talk about what this obsession with perfection is really costing us. It's not just about feeling uncomfortable, it's actually sabotaging our success in ways we might not even realize. First, let's look at what it's doing to our well-being. That constant voice in your head asking, "What if they find out I'm not good enough?" It's like having a critical roommate that never shuts up. Studies show this perpetual anxiety can actually change your brain chemistry. Remember the last time you couldn't sleep because you were replaying a minor mistake from 3 years ago? That's what perfectionism does. It keeps your body in constant fight or flight mode. This isn't just in your head. Doctors are seeing more stress-related health issues in people who maintain these perfect facades. Your body keeps the score, as they say. But the real tragedy, what it does to our relationships. Think about your closest friendships. I bet they didn't start with sharing LinkedIn achievements. They probably started with a shared embarrassing moment or admission of struggle. When we're always performing, people can sense it. It's like trying to hug someone wearing a suit of armor, technically possible, but not very comfortable for either person. The saddest part? The very connections that could help us grow and succeed are the ones we're pushing away by trying to appear flawless. And professionally? This perfectionism is like having the parking brake on while trying to accelerate. When you're afraid to make mistakes, you stop taking the risks that lead to real innovation and growth. It's like trying to learn to dance while refusing to ever lose your balance. That nagging feeling that you're a fraud? It gets worse the more perfect you try to appear. It's a vicious cycle. The higher you build that perfect image, the more terrifying it becomes to let anyone see behind it. And perhaps most critically, you become unteachable. Because if you're perfect, how can you improve? This is why some of the most polished professionals often plateau early in their careers. There's a crucial difference between appearing strong and actually being strong. Let's break down what real strength looks like versus what many of us think strength should look like. Think of it like this. Fake strength is like a fortress, impressive from the outside, but ultimately isolating. Real strength is like a bridge. It connects, it flexes, and that's what makes it unbreakable. You know that person who can never say, "I was wrong." They think they're displaying strength, but everyone else sees their insecurity. It's like wearing a "kick me" sign while thinking it's a cape. When criticism comes, they've got more deflections than a professional goalie. But here's the thing. Every deflection is a missed opportunity to grow. They're so focused on maintaining their image that they're like actors in a play who can never break character. It's exhausting for them and transparent to everyone else. They carefully curate their challenges like a museum curator, only taking on what they know they can handle. But life doesn't work that way, does it? Real strength looks like the CAO who starts a meeting by addressing their biggest mistake last quarter. It's counterintuitive, but this actually builds more trust than a perfect track record. These people treat feedback like gold. They mine for it, refine it, and use it to build something valuable. They know that criticism is just a free consultation in disguise. They understand that authenticity is like a superpower. The more real you are, the more people trust and want to work with you. It's magnetic. Instead of avoiding challenges, they see them as growth opportunities. Think of it like working out. The resistance is what builds the strength. Now, let's get practical. What does healthy vulnerability actually look like in real life? Because there's a big difference between authentic vulnerability and just oversharing. It's like that moment in a meeting when you say, "I'm not entirely sure about this approach." Instead of faking confidence, you're creating space for real collaboration. And here's the fascinating part. Research shows teams innovate more when leaders model this behavior. Remember how hard it was to raise your hand in school when you didn't understand something? That same feeling follows us into adulthood. But here's the plot twist. Asking for help doesn't make you look weak. It shows you're secure enough to prioritize growth over ego. Think of emotions like weather patterns. They're neither good nor bad. They just are. Real vulnerability isn't about dramatic displays. It's about being honest when you're excited, disappointed, or uncertain. It's saying, "I'm really nervous about this presentation," instead of pretending you're made of steel. In our age of instant Google searches, admitting you don't know something feels almost taboo. But saying, "I don't know, but I'll find out," is actually a power move. It builds more credibility than making up an answer ever could. When things go wrong, vulnerable people don't play the blame game. They're the first to say, "That was my mistake, and here's what I learned." This kind of ownership is like a trust accelerator in relationships, both personal and professional. When you embrace authentic vulnerability, you unlock 4 distinct powers that can transform every area of your life. Think of these as your new superpower toolkit. First, vulnerability acts as a trust accelerator. You know how some relationships take years to build trust, while others click instantly. That's often because one person had the courage to be vulnerable first. It's like pressing the fast-forward button on relationship building. When you show your authentic self, you give others permission to do the same, creating a positive feedback loop of trust. Second, it works as an innovation catalyst. When you're not afraid to be wrong, you'll suggest the wild ideas that might just work. Think about the most creative meetings you've been in. They probably happened when people felt safe enough to throw out crazy ideas. Vulnerability creates that psychological safety that innovation needs to thrive. Third, it serves as a connection multiplier. Every time you share something real, you create multiple opportunities for genuine connection. It's like dropping a pebble in a pond. The ripples keep expanding. One authentic moment can lead to dozens of deeper relationships because people remember and relate to your humanity, not your perfection. Finally, vulnerability becomes an influence amplifier. This might seem counterintuitive, but think about the leaders who've influenced you most. Chances are they weren't the ones who seemed infallible. They were the ones who shared their struggles, showed their growth, and brought you along on their journey. When you're vulnerable, your message becomes more relatable and, therefore, more powerful. Let's geek out for a minute about what's actually happening in our brains when we connect through vulnerability. Because this isn't just feel-good advice, it's backed by fascinating neuroscience. When we share authentic moments with others, our brains release oxytocin, often called the trust hormone. But here's the cool part. It's not just happening to the person being vulnerable. The person witnessing vulnerability also gets a surge of oxytocin. It's like a biological high five between brains saying, "Hey, we're in this together." Our brains have these amazing things called mirror neurons. When we see someone else being genuinely vulnerable, these neurons fire as if we're experiencing it ourselves. That's why you can feel that knot in your stomach when watching someone else in an uncomfortable situation. But it's also why authentic vulnerability is so contagious, in the best possible way. Studies have shown that people who engage in authentic social connections have lower cortisol levels. That's your stress hormone. Think about it. Maintaining a perfect facade is like walking around with your muscles tensed all day. When you finally let go, there's this physical relief. Your body literally relaxes when you stop pretending. Research in organizational psychology has revealed something fascinating. Teams that demonstrate vulnerability create what scientists call psychological safety loops. One person's openness triggers a cascade of trust-building responses in others. It's like starting a Mexican wave of authentic connection. Here's a simple but powerful equation I want you to remember. When you multiply your willingness to be vulnerable by the consistency with which you show up authentically, you create lasting influence. It's not about one big vulnerable moment. It's about the small, genuine interactions you choose every day. Let's break this down. The courage to be vulnerable part is your starting point. It's like the spark that starts the engine. But it's the consistency that turns that spark into a steady flame. Think about someone who's vulnerable once but then puts their walls right back up. It feels inauthentic, right? But when someone consistently shows up as their real self, whether they're succeeding or struggling, that's when true influence happens. It's like compound interest for your relationships. Small, authentic moments building up over time into something incredibly powerful. Let's explore how this vulnerability journey transforms 3 key areas of your life. Each of these transformations builds on the others, creating a positive spiral of growth. In your professional life, vulnerability becomes your secret weapon for leadership. Instead of hiding challenges, try saying, "Here's what we're struggling with, and here's how we're addressing it." Watch how this transparency energizes your team and builds unprecedented trust. When you acknowledge your own learning moments, you create an environment where innovation thrives. It's like giving everyone an unspoken permission slip to take smart risks. Your vulnerability creates a ripple effect. One leader being real about their challenges can transform an entire organization's culture from fear-based to growth-oriented. In your personal relationships, authentic vulnerability acts like a relationship accelerator. Those friendships that feel a bit surface level. Try sharing something you're genuinely struggling with, not for sympathy but for connection. Watch how the dynamic shifts from small talk to real talk. New friendships form faster and stronger when you lead with authenticity. It's like skipping the small talk and going straight to the good stuff. Even long-term family relationships can experience breakthrough moments when you choose vulnerability over familiar patterns. It's never too late to create deeper connections. But perhaps the most profound transformation happens within yourself. There's this beautiful irony. When you stop trying to be perfect, you become more of who you're meant to be. It's like finally exhaling after holding your breath for years. That constant energy you spent maintaining your image, it gets redirected into actual growth. Think of it as trading your emotional armor for wings. Real confidence isn't about never showing weakness. It's about being okay with your whole self. And paradoxically, this kind of authenticity is magnetic. Let's wrap this up with a practical action plan. Because understanding vulnerability is one thing, actually practicing it is another. Here's your roadmap to getting started. Don't try to transform overnight. Start with what I call the 1% rule. Share something slightly vulnerable once a day. Maybe it's telling your colleague you're nervous about a presentation, or admitting to your partner that you could use some help. Small steps create sustainable change. Pick one area of your life to practice first. Maybe it's with your team at work or with close friends. Think of it like choosing a testing ground where the stakes feel manageable. Success in one area will give you confidence to expand to others. Here's something crucial. Be as gentle with yourself as you'd be with a friend. If a vulnerable moment doesn't go as planned, that's not failure, it's practice. Remember, even the fear of being vulnerable is worth acknowledging. That's vulnerability too. Keep a quick note on your phone about your vulnerability experiences. What happened? How did people actually respond? You'll start to notice patterns, usually that people react much more positively than you feared. This evidence builds confidence. Finally, identify 2 to 3 people who can be your vulnerability buddies. Share your intention to practice being more authentic. Having supporters who understand your journey makes all the difference. Plus, they'll probably want to join you on this path.